You see in the Paleolithic, for instance, the cave paintings and so on, there's clearly a sense of the community shares a consciousness. It's not individual consciousness. The tribe or the village in later times, whatever. The consciousness is a communal consciousness. And then with agriculture and beasts of burden and kingdoms and empires and hierarchies and patriarchies, more and more it becomes individuation, becomes the norm, and in many ways that served us well, but we've lost that sense of community. And I feel like we're an adolescent on a binge, in sort of hyper-individuating and behaving in out-of-control ways, and at a certain point, just as in the addiction model, recovery is generally contingent on bottoming out.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
I'm Janaea Donaldson, and my guest today is William Stewart, a longtime friend and cultural observer. We're enjoying the warmth of the fire as late winter rain is pattering on our skylights, and talking about peak oil, fossil fuels, their effect on our lives. And William, in particular, you really have paid a lot of attention in a large range of areas of how technologies and other things affect our culture as a whole, but also us as individuals. And in particular, I'm interested in your observations on the sort of the shadow side of the dark side, of the underside of fossil fuels, of oil. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because so much of what Richard Heinberg speaks about is how we hit the energy jackpot in discovering fossil fuels and how to utilize them as a source of energy. And perhaps unlocking the safe deposit box might be a better metaphor, since it's a one-time deposit there that we have been drawing on but will not be able to draw on in the future. And indeed, that has given all kinds of benefits that we all know about, but there is a shadow side to it. And I think we underestimate the role of technology, and specifically fuel-driven technology, which most of our technology is, in creating a whole complex of psychological and spiritual malaise that pervades our culture. We have higher than ever rates of depression and suicide and violence and spousal abuse and on and on and on. And I think that the chain that leads to that is the abundance of fossil fuels leads to both a speeding up of culture and also an increase in numbers, sheer numbers of people that can be supported by the food technologies and transportation technologies and so on. So we live ever more in a sense of a mass culture. Our sense of personal space is ever more crowded out. We live ever more in little boxes, automobiles, television sets, computers. They're all these
little
confining little spaces.
Well, the transportation, I'm going back, there's also that transportation allowing us a mobility we didn't used to have, allows us to, well, it partly has, shattered families. We can all live all at different parts of the coast and just telephone each other or visit now and then, or not. So that social web extends that sense of personal isolation, or personal, little atom, each of us as little separate units.
In places that become ever more interchangeable. The notion of a local culture that is dependent on and conditioned by the physical environment, the nature of what grows there, the nature of the people who end up there, their ethnic backgrounds, what have you. All of that, it's a homogenization. You fly into any airport in the world. I recently went to Istanbul, and it was so striking. Going into the airport, it could have been anywhere in the world. And there's a kind of cultural leveling which makes people lose a sense of connectedness to any specific place. And you think about the patterns of most working people in America. They change jobs every 2 years or whatever the statistic is, and it's like, oh, you need to go to Dallas? Okay, I'll move to Dallas. You need to go to Atlanta? Okay, I'll move to Atlanta. So that's another contributing factor that's made possible by this oil glut that does not serve us well psychologically, because we lose sense of rootedness and connection and feel very, very alone, and it fosters the hyper-individuality of the culture. Me first, it's my fate is what matters, and the notion of caring about a community of people that you were born into and in whose arms you will die, I mean, we don't have that anymore.
And in that community, you'd have the kind of give and take. If you know you're going to be in the same neighborhood for 30, 40, 50, your whole life, you may agree with this neighbor in this particular issue, but you might have to be allies and disagree in another. You're going to have to be in a constant relationship that will have tension in it, but you're going to keep relating.
That's
you can't
right.
you aren't just going to pick up and
That's
move.
right.
Our community has a huge number of retired folks that have migrated from, mostly I would say Bay Area, Los Angeles, whatever,
Right.
have come here, and they are here to enjoy the leisure of the last years, and there isn't a sense of, we've grown up in this community, got to make sure to pay, vote yes on the school bonds to keep the schools going. There's and suburban values as opposed to more semi-rural practices, and they're different.
Well, rural, but also community-based values.
Yes.
Because the notion of what you're speaking of, that you, for better or worse, we are in this together. And I think that may be one of the gifts of the breakdown, which I see coming. The exact form of it I won't predict, but I feel confident as the more I learn about the issues related to energy and how coming energy scarcity, how that interfaces with population growth, with climate change, with antibiotic resistance, with 1,001 water shortages, which are going to be a huge issue in the coming century. How there are so many things. I feel confident that we are going to experience a major shakeup in terms of our social structures, our economic structures, our political structures, and I think it's going to be pretty grim. But one of the gifts that ultimately may inhere in that is a rediscovery of the necessity of community in a way that oil has, quote unquote, liberated us from, and in the process deprived us of a very basic psychic, spiritual nurturance that used to be the birthright of every human. You lived in your village or in your tribe, in your group, and for better or worse, with all your foibles, you had your people. That was unquestioned. And now people go to their graves with no one caring for them. It happens all the time. So I think there are silken linings that will come, but at a huge cost in terms of the material breakdown that will be the inevitable consequence, I think, of our habits, which have a very addictive nature. They are out of control. We're in denial about them, just the way the addict says, oh, I can manage it's okay. I can keep it together, and as we all know, often addicts do keep a very good front up for a long time.
Us addicted to this oil-based life with material plenty and, food from all over the world and so on.
And the
Addicted to the comfort.
individualism that goes with that hyper-individualism.
I think of that in terms of transportation, that any moment, I have a car, any moment I could pick up and go anywhere when I want to.
Right.
And the notion of having to change that habit to, let's say, share a car. Let's say 3 neighbors decide to share a car in the coming times. The kind of coordination we're going to have to do, the kind of communication we're going to have to do to just a lot. Do I ride with this person on that day and she rides with me on this day? I mean, it's like a whole different accommodating of one another's lives that we pretty much don't have to do. Those of us with private vehicles don't have to do at this time.
Very comparable to a dyadic marriage or quasi-marital relationship, in which if you're determined to stay with it, as you were saying the other day, you have to negotiate, and you get the rough edges sanded down inevitably, because you are, for better or worse, committed to staying with it. And of course, one of the symptoms of the anomie in the culture is the huge divorce rate, because, hey, this one isn't working out, I'm out of here. I'm getting on the plane fueled by fossil fuel, and I'm moving to Seattle. And so the notion of engaging in constant process with others in order to create a commonality that works for all of us is so alien to us in this. I mean, folks like us are trying to do this, but we're flying in the teeth of, I would say, 10,000 years of socialization. Certainly 500 years of socialization in terms of post-Renaissance individualism, the cult of the genius, the cult of the adventurer, the growth economy, the notion of steady state, the notion that the world cycles around year after year.
Well, that's not what we see. I mean, that's not what now we're in
It's a
this growth
vector
economy,
world.
and it's always better, upward and onward, and the stock market goes higher, and it's going to be that way forever and ever and ever is the picture.
Right, and we're the cartoon character that's running off the ledge and is about to plummet, but we're running on air, or running on empty, however you
Share a
want to.
cartoon with you. It has that picture of it's called What Lemmings Believe, and it has the cliff, and it has all the little lemmings. Here's what lemmings believe. The ones at the end are flying. That's part of our denial. I think about this oil situation, and particularly the question of scale is the one that challenges me. When I think about rebuilding community, I am beginning to experience that here with small groups gathering together to try and even look at this question. But we're just a tiny handful, and of course living in all different parts of the community, so it's not a geographical community. I mean, I'm going to have to get along with my neighbors if I want to do really local things. When I look at just the population level of our county or the world as a whole, and I look at questions like, all right, localizing this area, the first thing I come up with is, I don't think there's enough arable land to grow food, even with all the fossil fuel inputs for fertilizer, to feed the folks in our community.
Right.
So I think there might be sort of this counter tension as we start on the other side, as the energy decline is happening and it's more scarce and people are having to look at how do you allocate it. I'm wondering about increased violence and social breakdown as a result of that trigger, not just the hope, and we will work towards it, of community pulling together, but I can also imagine a lot of shredding or challenge.
I think it is. I absolutely agree with you.
Which is sort of hard to, I don't want to look
It
at
is.
that.
It is. We're talking about a complete social breakdown on a scale that has not been seen, certainly for many, many generations, the Black Plague maybe is comparable in terms of scale of impact. That's the kind of thing, the kind of analogy that I would look to in previous human societies. The impact of the Europeans coming to, especially the Inca civilization, where it really was wham, it just
Flatten the whole
yes. And my sense is that we will sort of sputter along in some version of our current way of functioning as a culture, with ever more people marginalized, ever more violence, ever more gated communities, ever more us against them or me against the world, stockpiling, shooting the invaders and so on, but still nominally within the framework of what we have. And then at a certain point, it's the tipping point metaphor or model, that at some point the whole thing will just tip over and we will enter a dark age such as none of us can imagine. And I think about that, and it's really scary, and it's really it's really scary, but I think just as in personal inner work, to deal with shadow stuff, you have to go into it. If you try to bypass it, if you try to sidestep it,
it always whacks you.
It always whacks you.
Safe.
And I think that as a culture, I feel like we're an adolescent on a binge. Global culture. Childhood.
Chugging oil.
Absolutely.
Right.
The childhood of the human race is, you see in the Paleolithic, for instance, the cave paintings and so on, there's clearly a sense of the community shares a consciousness. It's not individual consciousness. The tribe or the village in later times, whatever. The consciousness is a communal consciousness. And then with agriculture and beasts of burden and kingdoms and empires and hierarchies and patriarchies, more and more it becomes individuation, becomes the norm, and in many ways that served us well, but we've lost that sense of community. And I feel like we're an adolescent on a binge, in sort of hyper-individuating and behaving in out-of-control ways, and at a certain point, just as in the addiction model, recovery is generally contingent on bottoming out. Similarly, we as a culture, and at this point it's a global culture, will bottom out, and there will indeed be mass die-off, and it's, the particulars you can't predict, but I feel that there's a gift in there in the sense that the structures that we have are so dysfunctional that there is no way to repair them. I'm not opposed to attempts at repair and to try to model, in the midst of this crazy world, to try to model the kind of world we want to live in. But I still think the dark time is coming, and I think that the hope is that we will get beyond our adolescence as a civilization into a place where we somehow integrate the individual, the journey of individuation that we've gone on as a species over the last, let's say, 10,000 years, integrate that with an older, more underlayer of being a bunch of animals that sort of snuggle together for warmth, and somehow the spiral will come round to a place of integration.
And at this time, our recognition, hopefully, consciously, that we have to be caring for the entire planet, which has been so toxified and trashed and depleted and so on, that we cannot survive without taking care. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of remediation and so on.
That's right.
So in our last couple of minutes, you and I were talking yesterday about Ann Herbert's little piece about tips on how to behave at the dying of the world, the death of the world. I think she's got some nice wisdom. We have about 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yes, this is a piece that's been very meaningful to me, and it begins, sometimes it comes in a dream, and sometimes in one more newspaper headline, and then you know, with yourselves and your past and your future, you know, we are killing it all, and soon it will all be dead. We are here at the death of the world, killers, witnesses, and those who will die. How then shall we live? Probably good to tell the truth as much as possible. Truth is generally appreciated by terminal patients, and we all are. I mean, it has been rather great. Sunsets, oceans, some art, some moments between beings, smells of fresh mornings. As we kill it all by dominant habits, too huge to stop, we can thank it for the good times and say sorry by changing our own participation in the dominance stuff in some profound way. Doing this kind of change will involve confusion, embarrassment, and awareness of activities and attitudes you have not been conscious of. Doing this kind of change will involve increased aliveness for you personally, a fine thing to bring to a dying planet. And what I would say in closing is, we don't know if it's going to be the end or not. We can hope that we will get through it, but it doesn't matter, because we can't know. All we can do is to live with as much consciousness as we can now, in the hope that maybe, just maybe, we will get through it to the other side as a species, and maybe not, it's out of our hands, but to live as fully as we can.
And to embark on that journey not knowing the end with as much love and care